the Eight-Legged Watchman, Mark knew the rules of the paralysis. It had been his unwanted bedfellow since college. First came the buzzing, ecstatic noise in the base of his skull. Then, the weight on his chest, heavy and suffocating, like a bag of wet sand. Finally, the shadow. Usually it was a vague, human-shaped blur standing in the corner of his vision, pressing down on him, radiating malice. Mark had learned to live with it. It's just brain chemistry. He would tell himself as he lay frozen in the dark. It's not real. But tonight was different. The buzzing came. The weight settled. Mark opened his eyes, expecting the familiar silhouette of the Shadow Man in the corner. Instead, he was looking directly at the ceiling. Directly above his face, spanning the size of a dinner plate, was a huntsman spider. Mark's internal scream was deafening, but his physical jaw was locked tight. Arachnophobia was a primal thing for him, a fear written into his DNA. He watched in frozen horror as the creature shifted its weight. It was hairy, gray-brown, and impossibly fast. It jittered, its legs tapping a silent rhythm. For what felt like hours, Mark lay there, trapped in a cage of bone and muscle, staring at the monster. He prayed it wouldn't drop. Eventually, the adrenaline spiked hard enough to break the paralysis. Mark gasped, sitting up violently, swatting at the air. He flipped the light switch. The ceiling was empty. Just a dream. He panted, sweat soaking his t-shirt. Just a new flavor of the same nightmare. It happened 3 nights in a row. Every night, the paralysis struck. Every night, the Shadow Man was absent, replaced by the huntsman. Once, it was even on the pillow next to him. Mostly, it was on the wall. It never attacked. It just watched him. By the 4th day, Mark was exhausted. He sat on the edge of his bed, rubbing his eyes. "Why the spider?" he muttered to the empty room. Where did the shadow go? He looked at his wardrobe. It was an old, heavy oak piece that came with the apartment. The doors never stayed shut. The latch was busted, and if he forced them, the inside smelled of mothballs and dead air. So he always left them slightly ajar. A black vertical slit of darkness watching him while he slept. He decided to change the variables. If it's a hallucination, he reasoned, it's because I'm sleeping on my back. Tonight, he would sleep on his side, facing the room, facing the wardrobe. If he woke up paralyzed, he would have a full view of the bedroom. He would force his brain to acknowledge that the room was empty. 2 a.m. The static buzzed. The weight pressed down. Mark woke up. He couldn't move his arms. He couldn't wiggle his toes. He was a statue in his own bed. His eyes darted around the room. The streetlights outside cast long, pale bars of light across the floor. Creak! The sound was distinct. It wasn't the settling of the house. It was the friction of wood on wood. Mark's eyes snapped to the wardrobe. The huntsman spider was crawling out of the gap in the doors. It moved with a frantic, skittering energy. It didn't crawl toward the bed. It didn't crawl toward Mark. It scrambled onto the wall adjacent to the wardrobe and stopped dead. Mark watched it, terrified. But the spider wasn't looking at him. Slowly, maybe even deliberately, the spider lifted one of its long front legs. It waved it in the air, a jerky, mechanical motion. It pointed back toward the gap it had just exited. Look, The motion seemed to say, "Look at what I was running from." Against every instinct, screaming at him to close his eyes, Mark shifted his gaze. He looked past the spider, into the sliver of darkness between the wardrobe doors. At first he saw nothing, just the void. Then the void blinked. 2 crimson points of light ignited in the darkness. They were eyes. They were wet, reptilian, and filled with an intelligence that was ancient and cruel. Beneath the eyes of void, the paralysis turned from fear to absolute, soul-crushing terror. The shadow hadn't left. It had just moved in. The entity in the wardrobe shifted. It realized it had been seen. A hand. Long, emaciated, with too many joints, shot out from the darkness. It gripped the edge of the wardrobe door. Slam. The entity didn't just close the door. It slammed it with the force of a gunshot. The sound was so loud it vibrated in Mark's teeth. The reality. The noise shattered the paralysis instantly. Mark jolted upright, screaming, flailing backward off the bed. He hit the floor hard, scrambling into the corner, grabbing the lamp from the nightstand as a weapon. "Come on," he screamed, hyperventilating. "Come on." Silence. The room was still. The streetlights still cast their pale bars on the floor. Mark stood up, his chest heaving. It was real, he whispered. It felt real. He looked at the wardrobe. His blood turned to ice. The doors were shut. Not ajar, not slightly open. They were latched tight, the wood flush against the frame. Mark stared at them. He never closed those doors. The latch was broken. You had to force them shut. You had to slam them. It wasn't a hallucination. A movement in his peripheral vision caught his eye. Mark turned toward the window. Illuminated by the moonlight, sat a massive huntsman spider. It wasn't a dream projection. It was real, physical, and alive. It sat there, tapping its legs against the window, desperate to get out. It hadn't been haunting him. It had been trapped in the room with him. It had been trapped in the room with it. Mark didn't pack a bag. He didn't look for his keys. He didn't put on shoes. He unlocked his bedroom door and sprinted out of the apartment, leaving the door wide open behind him, hoping that the spider would get out before the wardrobe opened again. Super Grandma. Thread. Does anyone else have a super grandma? Mine is literally better than everyone else in my family. Posted by Sophie the Star. Date: October 14th, 10:15 p.m. on a forum where people post amazing stories. Okay, so I've wanted to brag about this for ages, but my parents are super weird about privacy. But honestly, it's too cool not to share. Most people have 2 grandmas, right? Well, I have 3. There's Grandma Beth, Mom's side, Grandma Rose, Dad's side, and then there's Grandma Dola. We call her Big Grandma, even though she's actually really tiny. She's ancient-like. Nobody will actually tell me her age, and my parents say it's rude to ask. But she has more energy than me, my brother, and my parents combined. Here's the weird thing, though. She's super secretive about her health. Like I have never seen this woman eat, ever. I've known her my whole life. I'm 19, and every Thanksgiving, Christmas, or birthday, her plate is empty. I asked my mom about it once when I was little, and she got really pale and told me, "Dola likes to keep her eating habits private. She eats before she visits so she can focus on us." I guess whatever she's eating at home must be superfoods or something, because she's practically superhuman. Does anyone else have a relative like this? Is it a generational thing to hide your eating? Comments. User Skeptic Kai. 3 grandmas? Is she a step-grandma or a great-grandma? User Sophie the Star OP. Skeptic Kai. Honestly, I'm not sure. We don't really have a family tree laid out properly. She's just always been there. Grandma Beth and Grandma Rose act kind of scared of her, to be honest. They get really quiet when she enters the room. It's a respect thing, I think. User Vampire Hunter 99. Never seen her eat. Ancient, pale family members. OP, are you sure you aren't living in a vampire novel? Check her dental records, LOL. User Biohacker. It's probably just a metabolic disorder or severe allergies. Old people get weird about bodily functions. Don't overthink it. Update 1. She's not just healthy. She's a genius. Posted by Sophie the Star. Time 10:25 p.m. Okay, the vampire jokes are funny. But seriously guys, she's not a monster. She's just incredibly talented. That's actually the main reason I'm posting. I feel like she's wasted in this family. My parents. They are... Look, I love them, but they are boring. My dad sits in his recliner for 6 hours a day staring at the news. My mom naps constantly. They have 0 hobbies. Grandma Beth and Rose just knit and complain about their joints. But Dola? Piano. We have an old dusty Steinway. Nobody plays it. But last week Dola sat down and played a great piece that sounded like nothing I have ever heard before. Perfectly. Without sheet music. Her fingers were a blur. She said she picked it up a few decades ago. Languages. She speaks everything. I heard her on the phone speaking something that sounded like Russian, but with more clicking sounds. Combat. This is the crazy one. Last year, a guy tried to snatch her purse at the park. She didn't even drop her cane. She just pivoted, grabbed his wrist, and threw a 200-pound man over her shoulder. She told the police she has a black belt in several styles. Why is she the only cool one? It's like all the talent in the bloodline skipped 2 generations and went straight to her. Or stayed with her. Comments. User OccultFan99. Wait, pause. Your parents are lethargic? They just sit around and sleep? User Sophie the Star OP. OccultFan99. Yeah, pretty much. They've always been low energy. They say Dola was a force of nature raising them, so maybe they're just tired from childhood. User Truth Seeker OP. This is going to sound crazy, but how often does Dola visit? User Sophie the Star OP. A truth seeker. She practically lives here. She stays for a few weeks, goes away for a few days, then comes back. We love having her. The house feels electrically charged when she's here. User Truth Seeker. And your parents get more tired when she's there, or when she leaves. User Sophie the Star OP. When she's here, they are basically zombies. When she leaves, they perk up a little bit. Why? User Mythos Junkie. The only thing I find weird is that she is so talented when the other family members are so boring. OP, reread your own sentence. That's not a coincidence. That's a correlation. Update 2. My brother used to be cool too. Posted by Sophie the Star. Time 10:38 p.m. You guys are being super cynical. My family isn't cursed or whatever. We just have bad genes. Except for Dola. Well, actually, that's not entirely true. My older brother Leo was actually amazing. He was a prodigy programmer. At 14, he was writing complex code, building his own engines, winning hackathons. He was so sharp, you could cut yourself talking to him. But, yeah, last Christmas he just stopped. Dola was staying with us for the holidays. Leo was stressed about a project, really burning the candle at both ends. I remember Dola went into his room to bring him some tea. She makes her own herbal blends. She sat with him for hours. She was so sweet. I heard her telling him, "You work so hard, my beautiful boy. Let Grandma carry that heavy dream for you. You deserve to rest." The next morning, Leo came out and he was different. He said he didn't want to code anymore. He said the screen gave him a headache. Now he works at a gas station and mostly just stares at the wall like Dad. It makes me so sad. I miss the old Leo. But Dola was devastated too. She looked so healthy and vibrant that Christmas morning, glowing with pride. But she kept saying how tragic it was that Leo burned out so young. Comments. User. Skeptic Kai. Okay. I'm not a skeptic anymore. OP. Get out of the house. User. Truth Seeker. Let me carry that dream for you. OP. Listen to me very carefully. She didn't comfort him. She didn't bring him tea. She harvested him. User. Do not look back. Did anyone else notice the timeline? Dola enters the room. Leo is a genius. Dola leaves the room. Leo is a husk. Dola looks vibrant and glowing the next morning. She ate his talent. User. Occult Fan 99. It's a muse eater. Or a leech. In folklore, there are entities that attach themselves to bloodlines. They don't eat meat. They eat vitality and skill. They keep the family around like cattle. Your parents are boring because she's already fed on them. They are empty husks. Leo ripened, so she plucked him. She. User. Sophie. The Star. OP. You guys are sick. She's an old lady. She loves us. She's just naturally gifted. I'm literally shaking right now. Why would you say that about my brother? He just burned out. User. Truth Seeker. OP. Think about it. You said you wanted to brag about her. You're writing all this out. You're telling stories. Do you have a talent for writing, Sophie? Do you have a vivid imagination? Because if you do, and you're in the house with her, you're the next course. Updated 3. Posted by Sophie the Star. Time, 10:45 p.m. I'm done with this thread. You people are paranoid freaks. I am sitting in my room right now, crying, and I can hear Dola humming in the hallway. It's a beautiful song. It's soothing. It's not scary. I'm going to go apologize to her for even posting this. She's the only one who understands me. She always tells me I have such a wonderful way with words. She says my stories are so rich and flavorful. Wait, she just stopped humming. I didn't hear footsteps, but the door just opened. She's standing there, smiling at me. She looks so young tonight. Her skin is so smooth. Hold on, she's asking me something. Account activity. User is idle. Comments. User. Truth Seeker. Sophie, don't look at her. Don't let her touch you. User. Truth Seeker. Sophie. User. Truth Seeker. OP, please respond. User. Sophie. The Star. OP. Hey guys. Sorry about the freakout earlier. My imagination just gets away from me sometimes. Grandma Dola just came in to check on me. She saw I was writing and gave me the biggest hug. She said she's so proud of my storytelling skills. She wants to take me to the dinner table now. She says we need to have a long talk about my future, because she thinks I have so much potential she can help me with. She says she's hungry. Bye. Comments. User, Truth Seeker. Comment posted 2 seconds ago. Stop. Read this before you go. User, Truth Seeker. Comment posted 1 minute ago. My parents told me to keep this a secret. I have never seen her eat. She speaks dead languages. She has the skills your family lost. Sophie, look at your brother. Look at your parents. She is not a human. She is a sort of demon that feeds on the skills and life force of your bloodline. The reason she is multi-talented is because she is wearing your ancestors' stolen lives like jewelry. If you go to that table, you won't die. It's worse. You'll become boring like everyone else in your family. You'll become a husk. And she will become a great writer. User, Truth Seeker. Run, Sophie. System message. User Sophie. The star has logged off. The high score. I was 6 years old when I realized God was a game developer. It happened on a rainy Tuesday. I was waiting for the bus, holding my mother's hand. The world looked different to me than it did to everyone else. Every person I looked at had a floating text box hovering above their head. A translucent blue interface that defied the laws of optics. Strength, agility, intelligence, vitality, numbers, just raw data. My mother was a level 4. Her highest stat was kindness, which glowed a soft, useless pink. Then the crash happened. A sedan skidded on the wet asphalt. It jumped the curb and slammed into a pedestrian man I had been watching because his constitution stat was a solid 8. The impact was wet and heavy. The man died instantly, but I didn't scream. I watched the numbers. As the life left the man's broken body, the blue text shattered. It turned into a stream of golden particles, like dust motes caught in a sunbeam. They didn't dissipate. They flowed. They streamed directly into the driver of the sedan. The driver, a terrified teenager, stumbled out of the car. Above his head, his constitution ticked up from a 3 to a 4. The world stopped for me. It wasn't a tragedy. It was a loot drop. I didn't rush. I was a patient child. I treated this knowledge like a secret quest item in my inventory. I observed. I learned the mechanics. The transfer wasn't random. It was the law of conquest. To the victor go the spoils. If you extinguished a life, you absorbed a fraction of its potential. My first farm was at 18. I was volunteering at a hospice care center. It was the perfect grinding spot low-level mobs. Zero aggro. Mr. Henderson was 92. His stats were abysmal, hovering near 0, except for his intelligence. He had been a professor of physics. In 14. I waited until the night shift. I sat by his bed. I placed a pillow over his face. I didn't do it out of malice. I did it to test the engine. When his heart stopped, I felt it. It wasn't a golden stream this time. It was a jolt of cold electricity that started in my fingertips and slammed into my pineal gland. My vision sharpened. The static in my head cleared. Concepts I had struggled with in school calculus, thermodynamics, suddenly snapped into focus. Intelligence +1. I walked out of that room a smarter man. And I was hungry for more. I spent my 20s optimizing my build. I realized quickly that random violence was inefficient. It drew too much attention from the admins, the police. I needed to be a stealth build. I targeted the invisible people, runaways, drifters, the elderly who had no family. I made their deaths look like accidents, or heart failures, or simple disappearances. Every 3 kills, I felt the shift. I remember the day my car got a flat tire on a deserted highway. I got out to fix it, opened the trunk, and realized I had forgotten the jack. I looked at the sedan. It weighed 2 tons. I looked at my strength stat. 65. I didn't panic. I just reached down, gripped the bumper, and pulled. The metal groaned. The car lifted off the asphalt as if it were made of styrofoam. My muscles didn't bulge. My veins didn't pop. This wasn't biological leverage. It was data. My avatar was simply defined as strong, so the universe bent to accommodate that definition. I changed the tire with one hand, holding the car in the air with the other, whistling a tune. I became the best. I dominated the stock market. Intelligence, 88. I won amateur MMA tournaments without breaking a sweat. Agility, 72. I was the perfect human specimen. But the numbers, they just kept going up, and the hunger grew with them. By 35, the game had stopped being fun. It had become a compulsion. I wasn't killing for stats anymore. I was killing because the numbers had to go up. I needed to see the digits tick over. I needed the rush of the golden dust entering my soul. I killed a marathon runner to boost up my stamina. I killed a chess grandmaster to cap my intellect. I looked in the mirror one morning. My reflection showed a man of average build, graying at the temples. But the interface showed a monster. Level 99, status, corrupted. I realized then that there was no end game. There was no congratulations screen. There was only the hunger, a black hole in the center of my chest that demanded more fuel. I would eventually eat the world. I had to be stopped. But my self-preservation stat was too high to allow suicide. The code wouldn't let me delete my own character. I needed a player too. Leo was a good boy. He didn't see the numbers. He saw the sunset. He saw the stray dogs. I loved him, and because I loved him, I decided to break him. There are monsters in this world, Leo. I told him when he was 10. They look like us, but they feed on us. I trained him. I didn't train him to play sports. I trained him to kill bosses. I used my immense stats to push him to the brink of death every single day. I taught him to read micro-expressions because he couldn't see the UI. I taught him to sense the weight of a killer's intent. You have to be faster, I would whisper, effortlessly dodging his punches with my agility 99. The monsters won't hesitate. He grew up hating me. He grew up fearing me. That was good. Hate is a powerful fuel. By the time he was 22, Leo was a weapon. He was natural, unenhanced, but he was honed to a razor's edge. He was the only thing in the world that could possibly scratch me. It was time for the final raid. I chose an abandoned shipyard for the finale. Classic, dramatic. I kidnapped a woman, a Charisma 9 television anchor, and tied her up in the center of the warehouse. I let Leo find the trail. I even wore a mask to make sure my identity would not disrupt the upcoming fight. When he burst through the doors, he didn't hesitate. He didn't ask why. He saw the monster he had been trained to hunt. "Let her go," Leo said. His voice was steady. He was ready. "Make me," I smiled, behind the mask. The fight lasted 4 minutes. To an observer, it would have looked like a blur. Leo was magnificent. He used every trick I had taught him. He used the environment. He used shadows. I had to focus immensely to let him win. My passive defense was so high that his knife broke on my skin during the first clash. I had to manually lower my guard, willing my constitution to fail, willing my hit points to drop. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. Fighting your own survival instinct is like trying to hold your breath until you die. But I did it. I left an opening, a fatal frame trap in my defense. Leo saw it. He drove a steel pipe through my chest. The pain was blinding. It was wonderful. I fell to my knees, coughing blood. The hunger in my chest finally, blissfully, went silent. "You did it," I wheezed, looking up at my son. He was panting, covered in sweat and grime, horror dawning in his eyes as the adrenaline faded. "You won the game," I said as the mask I wore finally fell. "Dad," he whispered, dropping the pipe. I smiled. "Game over." I closed my eyes. Darkness took me. But the mechanics of the universe are absolute. The law of conquest cannot be broken. To the victor go the spoils. New Game Plus had begun. As my consciousness faded, I felt the release. The massive titanic reservoir of power I had accumulated over 40 years. The strength of 1,000 men. The intellect of 100 geniuses. The agility of a predator. It all rushed out of me. It didn't disappear. Energy cannot be destroyed. It can only be transferred. Leo's perspective. Leo watched his father die. He fell to his knees, a scream building in his throat. He had done it. He had killed the monster. But the monster was his father. "Dad," Leo sobbed. Suddenly the air in the warehouse changed. A sound like a choir of bells erupted in Leo's head. A golden, blinding light exploded from his father's corpse. It wasn't physical light. It was something else. It rushed into Leo, slamming into his chest with the force of a freight train. He gasped, arching his back, his veins burning with liquid fire. It felt like his brain was being rewritten. His muscles buzzed with an impossible energy. He clutched his head, squeezing his eyes shut. What is this?" The light faded. The pain settled into a dull, hungry throb in the center of his chest. Leo opened his eyes. He looked at his father's body. Hovering above the corpse was a translucent blue box. Status: deceased. Loot transferred. Leo scrambled back, his breath catching in his throat. He looked around the warehouse. He looked at the woman tied to the chair. Above her head, glowing in the dim light, was a number. Charisma 9, Vitality 4. Leo stared at his own hands. He felt stronger, smarter, faster. He felt powerful. And beneath the grief, beneath the horror, a new sensation uncurled in his gut. A tiny familiar whispering voice that looked at the woman's stats and thought, "I wonder how high I can get that number to go." Leo screamed into the silence of the warehouse. The game had begun again. The Unsung Verse. The wind that day didn't blow. It shoved. It was a gray, blustery Tuesday. The kind where the sky looks like wet concrete and the air smells of ozone. Mark was walking home, head down, fighting the gale, when the object hit him. It didn't flutter. It slapped against his chest with the weight of a wet towel, clinging to his coat. Mark peeled it off. It was a piece of parchment, thick and textured, the color of old bone. On it, written in ink that looked disturbingly fresh, was a musical score. It was a simple melody, a series of rising and falling notes that looked melancholic even on paper. In the corner, scribbled in jagged red script, was a warning. Do not sing this to an audience. Mark was a musician by hobby, a man who hummed while he made coffee and whistled while he walked. He stared at the notes. His brain automatically translated the symbols into sound. It was a lullaby, a slow, haunting tune that felt familiar, like a memory from a childhood he never had. He looked around. The street was empty. The wind howled. He folded the paper and put it in his pocket. That night, Mark sat in his kitchen, the paper smoothed out on the table. He hummed the first bar. The sound resonated in the quiet room, deeper and richer than his voice usually allowed. It felt good. It felt like scratching an itch deep inside his throat. He sang the lyrics. They were phonetic, a language of soft vowels and sharp consonants that rolled off his tongue like oil. Omlacare, vista amor. Nothing happened. The lights didn't flicker. The floor didn't shake. The only change was the temperature. The kitchen felt suddenly cooler, as if someone had left the refrigerator door open. Mark laughed, shaking his head. Just a song, he muttered. A creepy song, but just a song. He practiced it for an hour. He mastered the cadence. He perfected the pitch. It was beautiful. It was too good to keep to himself. He needed to hear how it sounded in the air. Bounced off another person. He picked up his phone. Hey, Johnny, are you home? I want to show you something. Johnny met him at the park bench near the lake. It was dusk, the sun bleeding orange into the water. So, you found a magic song? Johnny asked, grinning, taking a sip of his coffee. Let's hear it, maestro. Mark cleared his throat. He held the parchment, though he had already memorized the notes. He closed his eyes, letting the melody take over. He sang. The song poured out of him, carrying a weight that silenced the crickets and the rustling leaves. It was a song of ending, a song of things that wait in the dark. As Mark hit the final low note, he felt a vibration in his chest, a profound sense of completion. He opened his eyes, expecting Johnny to be impressed. Johnny wasn't smiling. Johnny was pale, his coffee cup frozen halfway to his mouth. His eyes were wide, fixed on a point directly over Mark's left shoulder. Mark, Johnny whispered, his voice trembling. Don't move. Mark frowned. What? Did I mess up the pitch? Mark, Johnny said, and a tear tracked down his cheek. What is that tall man doing behind you? Mark felt the blood drain from his face. The air behind him was freezing. There's nobody behind me, Johnny. Yes, there is. Johnny's voice rose to a panic. He's standing right there. Oh God, he's looking at me. Why is he looking at me? Mark started to turn. Johnny, stop it, you're scaring. He's reaching for me, Johnny screamed. There was a sound. It wasn't a loud sound. It was a dry, sharp crack, like a dead branch snapping under a heavy boot. Johnny's head twisted. It moved with unnatural speed, snapping violently to the side. It didn't stop at the shoulder. It kept going, turning almost a full 180 degrees until Johnny was looking backward. Johnny slumped forward off the bench, hitting the grass with a heavy thud. Mark stood frozen, his breath caught in a silent scream. He looked at his friend. He looked at the space behind the bench. There was nothing there, just the wind. Mark didn't check for a pulse. He saw the angle. He knew. Panic, primal and white-hot, seized him. He turned and ran. He sprinted out of the park, his lungs burning, the parchment crinkling in his fist. He reached the alleyway behind a convenience store 3 blocks away and collapsed against the brick wall, gasping. It was the song. He choked out. The song called it. He looked at the parchment in his hand. The red warning seemed to glow in the dim streetlight. Do not sing this to an audience. I need to get rid of it, Mark said in a low voice. He grabbed the paper with both hands and tried his best to tear it apart. The paper stretched. It gave like rubber, elastic and tough, but it wouldn't rip. Mark pulled harder, straining until his muscles shook. The paper snapped back to its original shape, unblemished. He pulled out his lighter. He flicked the flame and held it to the corner of the page. The fire licked the paper. It should have curled. It should have turned to ash. Instead, the flame danced harmlessly against the surface. The paper remained cool to the touch. Mark dropped the lighter. He grabbed a marker from his pocket, a permanent marker he used for work, and frantically tried to scribble over the notes. If I can't read it, nobody can. The black ink touched the page and vanished. It evaporated like water on a hot sidewalk. The notes remained, crisp and clear. Mark stared at the cursed object. He realized then that he wasn't the owner of the song. He was just the instrument. He was the radio, and he had broadcast the signal. Sanctuary, he thought. I need holy ground. He ran again. The city blurred around him. He saw the church in the distance, a cross silhouetted against the moon. If I get inside, Mark thought, it can't touch me. He sprinted across the street, ignoring the blare of horns. He reached the sidewalk. The heavy oak doors of the church were just 50 feet away. He hit the bottom step. The wind returned. It wasn't a breeze this time. It was a roar. It slammed into Mark like a physical blow, knocking the breath out of him. His fingers, slick with sweat, lost their grip. The parchment was ripped from his hand. No, Mark screamed, lunging for it. He watched in horror as the paper caught an updraft. It danced in the air, swirling higher and higher, moving with a playful, malicious intent. It drifted over the church fence, back toward the busy street. Mark stood on the steps, reaching out to the empty air. A sound reached his ears. It was a whisper, carried on the wind. It sounded exactly like his own voice. The song is over. Mark felt a cold hand, large and impossibly strong, grip his chin. Another hand gripped the top of his head. He didn't have time to scream. Crack! Mark's vision spun violently sideways. The world tilted. The church steps rushed up to meet his face. As darkness closed in, the last thing Mark heard was the rustle of paper in the wind. It sounded like a chuckle, drifting down the street, waiting for the next curious stranger to pick it up. The demon's apology. Sunday was supposed to be pot roast at his grandparents' house. That was the routine. That was the anchor in Sean's perfectly calibrated life. Sean was a man of simple, profound happiness. He had a job that didn't kill his soul. A wife named Sarah who was 3 months pregnant with their first child, and a family that actually liked each other. He walked down the sun-drenched street, whistling, carrying a box of pastries. The disruption arrived not with a bang, but with a collision. A man in a hospital gown, barefoot and smelling of antiseptic and desperate sweat, slammed into Sean on the sidewalk. The impact knocked the pastry box to the ground. "Hey!" Sean shouted, stepping back. The man didn't apologize. He grabbed Sean's shoulders with a grip like iron. His eyes were wide, bloodshot, and terrified. He looked at Sean, not with aggression, but with a pity so deep it chilled Sean's blood. "I am sorry, Sean," the man screamed, spit flying. "But the demons are your friends and family." Sean froze. "How do you know my—" The man released him. He didn't run away. He simply stepped back into the bustling crowd, turning a corner into an alleyway with impossible speed. Sean stood there, his heart hammering. He knew my name, Sean thought, a cold knot forming in his stomach. He was a lunatic, just a lunatic who guessed. Or maybe he saw my ID badge. He checked his chest. He wasn't wearing a badge. Shaking off the unease, Sean continued to his grandparents' house. "Just keep moving," he told himself. "Don't let the crazy in." The distortion. The front door of the cottage was unlocked. That was normal. "Grandma? Grandpa?" Sean called out, stepping into the hallway. "I dropped the pastries. Sorry, but I can still—" He stopped. The air in the house didn't smell like pot roast. It smelled of sulfur, copper, and something old and rotting. The temperature seemed to have dropped 20 degrees. Sean walked into the living room. "Guys," he looked at the 2 armchairs by the fireplace. Sitting there were not his grandparents. Sitting in his grandfather's chair was a towering, hulking monstrosity of flayed red muscle and exposed bone. It had a jaw that unhinged down to its chest, filled with needle-like teeth. In his grandmother's chair sat a creature made of black, dripping tar, with eyes that burned like embers in a hollow skull. Sean's brain short-circuited. He couldn't scream. He couldn't breathe. The red monster turned its head. It looked at Sean with a hunger that felt ancient. "Sean!" it screeched. The voice was a distorted, guttural mockery of his grandfather's baritone. "Your laity." The tar creature stood up, its limbs elongating, snapping with the sound of breaking wood. It reached out a clawed hand. "Come here, dear." The horrific dissonance of hearing his grandmother's affectionate words coming from a demon broke Sean's paralysis. "No!" Sean screamed. He turned and bolted. He didn't look back. He heard the heavy, wet thud of footsteps chasing him, and the chorus of inhuman shrieks calling his name. Sean didn't stop running until his lungs burned, and his vision blurred. He collapsed onto a bench in the city park, miles away. He pulled out his phone, his hands shaking so violently he almost dropped it. He dialed Sarah. "Sean?" Her voice was calm, sweet. "Are you at your grandparents'?" "They're dead, Sarah." Sean sobbed, hiding his face in his hands. Something killed them. There were monsters in their skins. They were waiting for me. "Sean, slow down," Sarah said, concern sharpening her tone. "What are you talking about? Monsters?" "I know how it sounds, but I saw them. I'm going to call the police, but I need you to go to my parents. Warn them, please. Okay. I'm calling your mom right now. Just come home, Sean. Please come home. Sean hung up. He sat there gasping for air, trying to make sense of the nightmare. He looked up at the path in front of him. A woman was jogging past with a golden retriever. Sean blinked. Floating above the woman's head, in spectral glowing blue text, was a word. Jessica. He looked at the man reading a newspaper on the next bench. Above him, Robert. Sean rubbed his eyes. The names didn't disappear. He looked around the park. Every single stranger had a name floating above their skull. The crazy man, Sean realized. He knew my name because he could see it. He passed this to me. The walk to his apartment building was a gauntlet of paranoia. He avoided looking at faces, terrified of what he might see. But the strangers remained human. They just had labels now. It was only the people he loved that he had to worry about. He reached his street. He looked up at the third floor, his apartment window. He expected to see Sarah waving. Instead, standing in the window, pressing a clawed hand against the glass, was a gray, horned beast with hollow sockets for eyes. It was holding a cell phone to its ear. Sean's phone buzzed in his pocket. He looked at the screen. Incoming call, wifey. He looked up at the window. The beast waved at him. It opened its mouth, revealing rows of serrated fangs, and mimed talking. Sean didn't answer. He turned and ran toward the police station 3 blocks away. They got her, he thought, tears streaming down his face. The infection spread. They are all gone. Please, you have to listen to me. Sean slammed his hands on the front desk. My wife, my grandparents, they've been replaced by demons. The desk sergeant looked at him calmly. Miller floated above the officer's head. Sir, take a breath. We have officers checking your residence right now. Don't let them touch you, Sean screamed. Sir, we have your family coming in. They are very worried about you. No, don't let them in. Sean backed away, pressing himself against the wall. The precinct doors buzzed open. Sean, it was his mother's voice. But when Sean looked, he didn't see his mother. 2 gargoyle-like creatures shuffled into the lobby. Their skin was like cracked stone, their eyes glowing green. One of them, the one with his mother's voice, reached out a claw. Baby, what's wrong? The monster gurgled. Behind them, the gray beast from his window, the one that had eaten Sarah, walked in. Sean snapped. Get back, he shrieked, grabbing a stapler from a desk and hurling it at the monsters. What are they doing here? Those demons killed my family. Shoot them. Why aren't you shooting them? He lunged for an officer's holster. Restrain him, Miller shouted. 3 officers tackled Sean. As his face was pressed into the linoleum, he watched the monsters crying, hugging each other, their horrific visages twisted in what looked like mock sadness. Later, the padded room was white, silent, safe. Sean had been there for 6 months. The doctors called it acute paranoid schizophrenia with Capgras delusion. Sean knew the truth. It was the curse. He sat on his bed, staring at the wall. He had refused all visitors for 4 months. It was the only way to stay sane. He had spent the solitude thinking, analyzing. The demons never bit him. The day at the police station, the mother demon hadn't tried to claw him. She had tried to embrace him. The Sarah demon had brought him fresh clothes. The crazy man, Sean thought. He said, "The demons are your friends and family." He hadn't meant that demons had replaced them. He meant that to Sean's eyes, his friends and family were the demons. The curse didn't kill anyone. It did something worse. It placed a filter over Sean's perception, turning love into horror. It isolated the victim, forcing them to run away from everyone they cared about until they died alone in a cell. And the only way to break it, "I am sorry, Sean." The stranger had apologized before damning him to the curse. He realized what he needed to do. He had to transfer the curse to free himself of it. "I have to get out," Sean whispered. A couple of days later, the fire alarm began. A kitchen fire in the cafeteria. The automated doors unlocked for evacuation protocol. Sean didn't hesitate as he saw this opportunity. He blended in with the staff in the chaos, stole a jacket from the coat room, and walked out the side exit. He didn't run to the woods. He ran back to the city, back to his neighborhood. He needed someone, but not just anyone. The curse targeted loved ones. He needed someone who had people to lose. He stood on the corner of his old street, panting, scanning the crowd. He saw a tourist, a loner. Then he saw him. A young man in a sharp suit, carrying a bouquet of flowers. He was walking with a bounce in his step, smiling at his phone screen. Above his head the name glowed bright and clear, unlike the others. Andrew. Andrew looked happy. Andrew looked like he was on his way to see someone he loved. Sean felt a surge of bile in his throat. This was evil. This was the worst thing a human being could do to another. "But I want to see my wife," Sean thought, his heart breaking. "I want to see my son." Sean lunged. He grabbed Andrew by the lapels of his expensive suit. Andrew dropped the flowers and the phone. "Hey, what the hell?" Andrew shouted, struggling. Sean stared deep into Andrew's confused, terrified eyes. He locked onto him, feeling the dark weight in his own soul start to shift, ready to pour out. "I am sorry, Andrew," Sean screamed, the tears finally falling. "But the demons are your friends and family." Sean felt it instantly. The energy snapped. Sean felt a physical lightness, as if gravity had released its hold on him. He blinked. The glowing text, "Andrew," above the young man's head, vanished. Sean released him and shoved him backward. "You're crazy," Andrew yelled, dusting off his jacket. "Stay away from me." Sean didn't wait. He turned and sprinted down the block. He ran toward his apartment building. "Sean!" The voice stopped him dead. He froze. He turned slowly, terrified of what he might see. Standing by the entrance of the building was a woman holding a baby carrier. She looked tired. Her eyes were red from crying. She didn't have scales. She didn't have glowing eyes. She had soft, pale skin and brown hair tied in a messy bun. "Sarah," Sean choked out. She dropped her bag and ran to him. Sean braced himself, but when she hit him, it wasn't a clawed attack. It was warm. It was soft. It smelled of vanilla and baby powder. "Oh God, Sean, the police said you escaped." She sobbed into his chest. "I was so scared." 50 yards away, Andrew picked up his flowers. He shook his head, muttering about city lunatics, and checked his phone. No new messages. He looked around. The street was full of strangers. They all looked normal. He felt fine. He turned the corner, walking toward his mother's house for Sunday dinner. completely unaware that his world hadn't ended yet. But it was waiting for him right behind the front door.
Did you like this chapter? More are on the way. If you want to keep up with the story next time it releases, don't forget to subscribe. And if you have the means and the time, consider buying me a coffee. I will see you soon.